Thanks for joining us here on Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle, and this is a show where we talk all things parenting. And right now, parenting is in full swing with the kids home from school over the summer. And I bet that you're doing a ton of activities and camps, but when it's time for downtime, are you letting them use an iPad, a computer, letting them watch TV, maybe gaming? Most parents do. But then you might notice some tantrums or disrespectful behavior. It's called emotional dysregulation. And we talked with Dr. Michael Manos with the Cleveland Clinic about why this is happening and how to make sure that your kids' screen time isn't messing with their ability to control their emotions. I think my first question is sort of an overall reaching question. Is screen time increasing for our kids, especially within the past few years?
Well, there's not a question that screen time is more engaging and is more indulged in by kids over the past several years. There's not a question about that.
Yeah.
And the availability of screen time is ubiquitous.
How can you tell if your kid is getting too much?
Well, when the child is ignoring other responsibilities, is not paying attention to directions, is reluctant to leave the screen at a request of a parent. Like if it's time to come to dinner, the child has a tantrum because they don't want to stop what they're doing in front of the screen. Those are the problems that parents typically are encountering.
Now, I might be revealing a little too much about my own life here, but I mean, I've had days where my kids were feeling off. And maybe I wasn't home for a couple hours. Maybe dad was in charge. Maybe they were at school and they had, some classes that were computer centric. And I just feel like their emotions are a little out of touch, and maybe they're a little bit more short-tempered than usual. Is that something that, if parents are seeing that, if they're seeing their kids getting a little bit too emotional or they are throwing those tantrums, is that a sign that even earlier in the day they might have been getting too much computer time or video game time or even just television?
So it's not necessarily that kids' emotional development is being dysregulated. It's actually when a child is deprived of a screen or is told to leave a screen at the moment, that is the problem. And that when children are told to turn the screen off and do something that is far less engaging, then that's the time when emotional dysregulation can occur. Kids will have a tantrum. They'll refuse to comply with the parent's request. And subsequently, that's when screen time can be rather intrusive in family life. Because what does a screen do? A screen arouses the child to activity or to action by pushing buttons, by manipulating some kind of cursor on the screen to manage some kind of game endpoint. And the engagement of the game is far more intense than the engagement of having to take the garbage out or the engagement of walking the dog. And people want to be aroused. People want to have the attention that we call automatic attention, which has its network in the brain called the default mode. They want to have automatic attention activated. I mean, everybody likes watching a good movie, reading a good book, or engaging in a very good conversation. And when children are confronted by a screen, the intensity of engagement with the screen is so significant that leaving the screen is like going from a warm and sunny day to jumping into a cold bath. And at times, for some children, they can find that painful.
Yeah. I've heard in the past that that screen time, whether it's watching a movie or it is a little bit more interactive like a game, just the screen itself, and like you were talking about, where it's already pre-programmed and there's algorithms placed in there, that it puts kids in almost like a zombie-like state. Is that still what we're thinking?
Well, I hesitate to call it a zombie-like state because zombies are dead.
Yeah.
And children certainly are not dead. So what's actually occurring is the engagement of some activity, but it is a programmed activity. And in many cases, it is designed to keep a person watching. For example, TikTok is specifically designed to keep a person engaged with the screen, which is why things pop up every few minutes or every few seconds to keep the engagement occurring. The one thing that screens do not give, though, is direct human contact and direct human engagement. And how do humans learn empathy? But they learn empathy and understanding how another person feels by actively engaging in face-to-face communication. So
I want to ask too, because we've talked about kind of the short-term effect, meaning, you know, the kid immediately right after turning off the screen or getting off the video game has that tantrum or is a little bit more emotional. But what are some of the long-term effects? Like if we are, you know, on a daily basis getting over the 2 hours of screen time, what can that do for long-term emotional regulation?
Well, so that's a very good question. And I don't know of any actual science that's behind that. But by just observing what's occurring, people can generally find that when you're immediately reinforced, when you push a button and immediately something happens that is a result of your activity, and life doesn't work like that. You don't push a button and somebody changes their mind, or you don't push a button and something shows up. Life isn't like that. And so the only thing that I can do is conjecture here, because I'm not aware of any clear studies that demonstrate long-term effects of screens. Mm-hmm. The brain doesn't necessarily change, though there are some studies that indicate, for example, that using screens can result in improved attention, and in some cases even improved relationships. So for example, a parent who watches a screen with a child and interacts with the child during the screen time, that can actually be very beneficial, and I've recommended that any number of times. So that if a parent's watching Peppa Pig with a 2-year-old, then the parent can interject, "Oh, that made Peppa mad," or can actually use language to intercede and describe a behavior that may not be particularly obvious to the child just by watching the screen. So when parents do engage screens with children, then that has been demonstrated to actually have a positive effect, especially in relationship.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was going to ask, and that might be one way, but is there any other way to counteract the effects of screen time? Like, is there an activity that we should be doing? You mentioned one that we can do during screen time, but even immediately after, that will help get their emotions back in check.
Well, that's a very interesting question. And the child has just come from a virtual world to a real world, and the only medium that there is to help that transition is language. And so parents typically are frustrated when a child does not want to get off the screen. So what's the interaction right after the screen stops and the child leaves the screen? The parent's upset and angry, and because the child has not complied with whatever request there is. Mm-hmm. So to show patience, and certainly to provide a kind of transition into the physical world again, not the virtual world, but the physical world, to point things out that might be occurring. There's a robin in the tree, or those are kind of rather weak gestures. So I'm not saying that they're going to make a huge bit of difference, but to orient the child to the real world, to the physical world, as to what's happening right now. Playing with the dog or doing something that is engaging in the physical world. The question you ask is a very, very difficult question. In fact, nobody's ever asked me that question before. Yeah. So well, I'm not quite sure how to respond to it.
I like the suggestions that you had, just kind of reorienting them with what's reality. And we keep talking as if, I feel like we are talking as if we are talking about little kids, but does this also apply to teens? Because I feel like every parent of a teen I know says, well, good luck getting them off their phone, or good luck getting them off of whatever device. Do their emotions also get impacted by the amount of screen time when they're on their phones, when they're on social media a lot? And can we apply all of these things to also the older kids?
Well, so adolescence is a very yeasty time. It's a time when kids develop relationships. They form bonds with other people. They learn social skills. They figure out how to activate themselves and their behavior in group activity. And so it's a very, very active time, and a time when people really need to pay attention, not to an algorithm that's occurring on a screen, but to the real life dance of life. Mm-hmm. People doing and saying things that would not be expected, or doing and saying things that might not seem appropriate, or doing and engaging in things that do seem appropriate. And then, is it a good time to model that behavior? In other words, to imitate that behavior. So people learn to interact with other people by doing just that, by interacting with other people.
Yeah. Overall, do you think, and I feel like we've been hearing this for years, but you've mentioned some positives about screen time. Overall, being outside in the real world is still better for our brain health and our kids' brain health than connecting with the screen.
Well, so this is strictly an opinion. And what's lacking in the world these days is true empathy, people understanding what other people are going through, people understanding how a person reacts to adverse circumstances in a world that seems to be changing dramatically every day. And to be able to adapt to that changing world is a condition that all of us have to navigate somehow. And all of us navigate it in various ways differently. And to have the opportunity to navigate it and to react to it and to engage in the day-to-day activity in real world circumstances is, I think, what's often missing with overindulgence in screens. I think, it's very useful to acknowledge that it's not just one or two parents who are concerned about screens. It's almost every parent who is concerned about screens. And the overindulgence of kids' exposure to screens, especially things that they shouldn't be seeing, is a big problem these days. Because how do you keep an adolescent from probing screen time and activating the pop-ups that occur?
Yeah.
And so many of these things kids are being exposed to things that are well beyond their years.
Yeah. No, that's what I've heard too.
I'm glad I'm old and kids are grown. And we've already gone through all of that.
I know. And when you said that the science isn't there yet to see the long-term effects, I don't want my kids to be the guinea pigs here. So it makes me really concerned because I don't want to be studying the effects, of our mistakes years down the road with my children.
Well, and of course, there are certain guidelines, like the American Academy of Pediatrics says no screens for a child 3 years and under.
Yeah.
And limited screens for a child ages 6 and under, of about an hour a day at the most.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I always ask my patients is, how much screen time does your child have in the home? And it truly is extraordinary. Even on a school day, sometimes kids have up to 5 or 6 hours.
Wow.
And then on a weekend day, it's up to 10 hours a day.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot.
And screens are great babysitters.
Yeah. Yeah.
The whole point, however, is relationship. What kind of relationship do you have with a screen versus what kind of relationship do you have with another human being?
A big thanks again to Dr. Michael Manos for taking the time to talk with us. And we all know that kids will have some screen time, but hopefully this gave you an idea of how to set those boundaries. Thanks to all of you for joining us here on Mom Squad. You can join our squad by joining our private Facebook group, Mom Squad with Maureen Kyle. This is where we share parenting information, but also get ideas about what experts you want to hear from. You also get a chance to connect with other parents. So I'll see you over on the Facebook group, and I'll see you next week for another episode of Mom Squad.